Walters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you had a responsible government, the very last thing they would change would be restricting the voting right. They would take every other opportunity to rectify a situation using every other methodology, because they would know that that's where they get their legitimacy. But this seems to be a government that feels that it is not accountable to people. While, Madam Speaker, we see them and the people of New Zealand see them, they are fooling nobody. And they're fooling nobody because they can stand in this House and say what they will. But we have advice from the Electoral Commission on paper that the people of New Zealand can read and that I'll walk through today that shows that they had other options which could have rectified the problem. They didn't choose to see those other options through. They chose this. They are choosing to limit the vote. It is not the only thing available for them to rectify this problem. So, one more time, let's go through the problem statement. The issue here doesn't relate to the 2026 election. The problem, as outlined to us on the committee, is that when we get to 2032, we will have 1 million special votes. But the important thing to know is we'll have 1 million special votes if we do nothing. And that will be too hard to count within that time frame. So the problem statement for the government was, how do we either limit the number of specials or count the vote quicker or do both of those things and still protect the right to vote? And the big question is there any way they could do that by 2032 without making the changes that they're proposing in terms of restricting the time that people get to register? And clearly, it is the case that there are other options. That was put to us by the Electoral Commission. We're debating it in this House, but it was put to us very clearly that we could make those two changes. We received a letter from the Electoral Commission on the 16th of October that is worth a read for members of the public. They set out 3 scenarios. The first was that we do nothing at all. The second is that we make the changes the government proposed. The third was that we make every other change that's proposed in this bill except for that change of restricting the right to register. So if we did nothing at all, we'd have 1 million specials. If we did everything in the bill by 2032, we'd have 727,000 specials. Now here's the telling comparator. The third scenario, if we did the other things they advised us to do within the bill, except for restricting the right to register, we would have 740,000 specials by 2032. Those numbers are very similar. 727 versus 740,000. In other words, it's 13,000 votes difference in terms of specials. The point that the Electoral Commission were making is that once you see and embed these changes, the number of specials will drop. You just need to give it the time to do that. Again, this is a choice. This is a choice, and the members of the Justice Select Committee especially know this. So appalling that you stood and spoke to this today. You knew we had a choice. You know we had a choice. We were advised that we have a choice, and yet you're making the decision to restrict the vote. And that is the pure and simple truth.